Welcome to The Deepest Cut, a podcast about the movement from painful experiences to meaningful music. I'm your host, Matt Connor. I want to be honest about the darkness, he told me, but I also want to be honest about the light. There was a lot for me to chew on in my recent conversation with Andrew Peterson about his song The Rain Keeps Falling. We discuss its origins, and even the time that Andrew said he found himself crying in a janitor's closet for hours on the Behold the Lamb of God tour. But it was that bit about honesty and the light, that's what really got me. Now, if you're new to The Deepest Cut, you should know that we dive into the deep end of the conversational pool with songwriters about the song they define as the most painful or difficult they've ever composed. For Andrew, the song he chose was The Rain Keeps Falling, a song born from experiencing several personal and professional changes all at the same time. I knew this conversation with Andrew would yield something meaningful. It's difficult to even distill down his substantive body of work as an award-winning author, songwriter, filmmaker, and founder of The Rabbit Room. However, I first came to know him through those earliest albums that connected with me on such a deep and really unexpected level, and it's the same thoughtfulness that went into that early songcraft that provided the substance of this conversation. On this episode of The Deepest Cut, Andrew talked to me about the lonely experiences behind the song and pushes back on what it means for art to be honest, quote, in the way that it's typically discussed, perhaps giving us all a reason to think more about the ways that beauty invades the spaces we inhabit. We'll let him explain it for you, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Andrew Peterson. Hello and welcome to The Deepest Cut. My name is Matt Connor and I'm your host. Today I'm just so thrilled to be joined by my friend and singer-songwriter Andrew Peterson. Really less singer-songwriter these days, more author, but we're still here. Hey Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. I wanted to say right off the bat that, obviously everyone who joins me on the podcast here singles out a song to focus on as one of the most painful, the most difficult songs to write, at least that they want to talk about publicly. And yet with you, to me, there are several songs that have brought me to tears, that have just been so meaningful in meeting me at darker places, broken places, moments of grief, etc. So before we actually dive into the song itself, I wanted to start with, what was it like as a prompt for you to try to identify that song? Was it easy? What was that like?
Yeah, I thought about it a lot, actually, because the prompt was the most difficult song that you've written, or the song that kind of was the written from the most difficult place. And I have a few of those. And so, I wrestled with it quite a bit. And I think the why I landed on this one, maybe it was just that it's the one that I felt the most comfortable talking publicly about. And even that is a little bit uncomfortable for me. But some of the other ones, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to get into what was behind that song so much. But this is one that I've been pretty open about a season of depression that I went through and real deep struggle. So it's not as hard for me to go there publicly. Does that make sense?
Sure. Are there other songs, because I'm assuming there are stair steps here. There are songs clearly that you just identified. There are songs I've released that I really would rather not talk about publicly. There are now, here's this song that you released that you will talk about publicly. Is there a step below those two? Songs I've never released that I wrote and they were just really a cathartic exercise and nothing more?
Yes. Yeah. And I wouldn't say they were nothing more than that, but they were songs that I wrote. And, the feeling when I'm writing a song is I want to share this with someone. I want this song to go out into the world and do some kind of good. But then upon reflection, or after sharing it with a few close friends, realizing, nope, I don't know that this would be super helpful, or it would draw too much attention to me. Does that make sense? I remember hearing, this may not work, but David Wilcox, who's a songwriting master, I heard him talk one time about how when he was young, he could hear himself just trying to be clever in his songs. And I remember when I heard that, I was young and I was kind of like, what's wrong with being clever? Being clever is awesome. And I think that what he's getting at is just that there's a feeling, especially when you're a young songwriter, things are so raw that you're just like almost. I'm more aware now of when a song is drawing too much attention to me, rather than the song existing for as its own thing. Even though I'm connected to it, but like ultimately, I want the listener to forget about me and let the DNA of my song kind of inform their own story and ultimately draw them to God. And that's the hope, is that it'll unlock something in their own life that the Lord will be able to speak through. But like there are some songs that I'm like, actually, I think this is just me working something out, and I don't know if this is going to be helpful to other people. And I'm not always right about that. I think even in this song, there was the third verse or whatever of the song. I was like, ooh, that's too much about me. I don't feel super great about it, and I had to be talked into releasing it, or not changing the line of this song. Does that make sense? So there are songs that I can look at in my catalog and I can be like, I think that might actually cause more pain for the person I was writing it about, or it could maybe do some damage. It wouldn't necessarily be a way of loving the listener. It's just me loving myself. Does that make sense?
Sure, sure. And I guess I understand the damage part, but I guess I'd almost want to push back in a way, because I know like you and I share some similar musical sensibilities, I guess, in terms of our taste. Like I know we love Adam Duritz and Counting Crows and other emotional connective tissue in that way, where it's like, here, like someone like Adam or someone like Matt Berninger or the National or whatever, like when they're singing about very specific, when Adam sings about Maria all the time, or he's referencing like driving on Sullivan Street, like I don't know where Sullivan Street is. You don't know where Sullivan Street. Like here are these details and these people and these places that we don't know, and he's like so into his own pain. And yeah, it is that like specificity that allows me to connect with it versus like some universal platitude that never sticks because it lacks any sort of you know what I'm saying? When I say that, like what do you say back to that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say that that's something that I talk about, like whenever I talk about songwriting, is like, yes, put your own details and your own concrete mess into a song. That's so important. But there is this like weird subtle, and I think maybe it's just a discernment thing. Like there's something in me that wants to make sure that I'm being responsible with the platform that I've been given, or putting something out for public consumption. It brings with it a whole bunch of baggage, or I don't know. There's a wisdom component to it. And I'm not saying that I'm wise, but I want to be wise.
Sure.
And so yes, there's a difference in my mind between adding concrete details and telling your own story really well, and turning the audience into your counselor. And I think that that's something that I didn't understand when I was 25 and I was writing songs. I was just like, you know just bleeding all over the place and trying really hard to work out a bunch of stuff. And I think that in some ways the difference is this about me, or is it about loving the listener? And sometimes, by telling your own story well, you are loving the listener, but sometimes you're not. And so I think that the songs that I haven't released are fall into that category, where I'm just like, yeah, I'm not sad that I wrote this song. I needed to work this out, but I'm very content to put it away and let it never see the light of day.
By the way, when you talk about being 25 and writing songs in that way, like is there a song early in the catalog that you're like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about?
Oh, well, one, it's not exactly what we're talking about, but there's a song called The Chasing Song. I just talked about this. It's on my first record, and talk about being clever. Like I can hear myself trying to be clever in that song. Let me see how many obscure biblical references I can squeeze into the chorus. But ultimately, like when people request that song now, which is rare, but it happens, I don't play it. Like somebody just asked me the other day, is there a song that you won't play? And that's one of the ones that I just don't like playing. Partly because it's too high, and all my old songs are too high for me to sing. But really, what I hear in that song is me beating myself up. Well, I can hear the remnants of my legalism in that song. You know what I mean? Like I can hear a guy who's like full of shame, and it's all about me trying harder, and like, and failing, and it's okay. Like, I'm not saying I regret writing that song, but that's not where I am anymore. Like, over the last 25, pushing 30 years since I wrote that song, like, I would much rather sing about, if I'm going to sing about my insufficiency, I would rather do it by singing about God's all sufficiency. You know what I mean? And so it's okay to express those things. And I know that the Lord uses bad songs all the time. And so it's okay. But at the same time, I'm just not there anymore. I don't, it's hard for me to, and I want to be able to believe what I'm singing. So if I'm doing a song in a show, I don't know, I don't want to ever fake it. I want to be able to mean what it is that I'm singing.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, obviously, we want to get to the song that you like submitted for this. The rain keeps falling. Can you give us just an idea? Like, where were you? What's the context?
Well, I was here in Nashville. I'm at my house right now, and so I was about 20 yards from where I'm sitting right now. We had a swing hanging from the branch of a hackberry tree, like a porch swing that was on some chains, and it kind of overlooked the woods behind our house. And I was sitting on that swing on this rare, not freezing day in, I think, March. I was in the studio recording The Burning Edge of Dawn, which was an album that I made with my old friend Gabe Scott. And it was a season of real pain and grief and transition. I had just turned 40, I think, or maybe it was a few years after I had turned 40. Can't remember. And but I had gone through a season of depression at the time, and I've struggled with melancholy a lot and over the years, and seasonal affective disorder maybe, and if you're a songwriter, it doesn't hurt to like being sad. I don't mind so much. I resonate deeply with sad things, melancholy things, and yet I was 2 or 3 years into it at this point, and just really struggling, like a lot. And I've thought about it. In hindsight, you can look back and see all the things that led to the car crash. And for me in this season, it was like I had just turned 40. I had just celebrated my 20th anniversary. I had just finished the Wingfeather Saga, the last book of I had just completed my record deal and done my last album on that contract. So I was kind of like at a crossroads where I was like, do I want to re-sign with the label and keep making music? I had toured with Ben Shive and Andy Gullahorn for at least a decade. And, life circumstances changed. Ben wanted to stay home and produce records, and his career was taken off. And so those guys I wasn't touring with anymore. So I was like out every weekend with some random sideman, that good guys, great players and stuff. But it was very unsettling because it was just all changing. And my oldest two sons, or we have three kids. My oldest two were moving from being 11 and 12 to 13 and 14. And it wasn't like they were great. But I was remembering a lot of things that happened to me when I was their age, things that I had done, things that had been done to me. And I don't mean that sounds really ominous. I just mean, just painful stories, junior high stuff, and being exposed to the darkness of the world in certain ways. And that was all happening around the time that I was the age that my kids were growing into. And so that was triggering all these memories, and there was just a lot of unfinished business. So all of those things together went into this like hurricane that I found myself in for like a couple of years. And it was just a miserable season. So the way I think of it, Light for the Lost Boy, which is a lot about the grief of longing for the innocence of childhood and longing for a new creation and redemption. It's an autumn album. And so it's even the album cover is very autumnal looking, and it's a lot about the leaves falling and getting ready for the long winter that's coming. And I didn't really realize it, but I went out and did a tour for that record, and every night I was singing about these big loss of innocence, childhood stuff, songs about my kids, all this kind of stuff. I had no idea that I was teetering on the edge of a long season of winter and depression. So this is the longest answer ever, but that album, Burning Edge of Dawn, are like bookends of that season. So when I went into the studio to record The Burning Edge of Dawn, I was just like, Ben wasn't available to produce the record. He'd produced like all my albums since I'd met him almost. And so I was very fish out of water with my old friend Gabe, but every producer works differently, and I felt kind of like I don't know what I'm doing without my this support that I've had for all these years. It happened to be like maybe started in February, March, April. So the mud season in Nashville, and Gabe's studio on Music Row was in a basement with no windows. So every day I was driving through the rain to the studio, going into a basement, trying to work out these songs in this very new environment with all of this depression. And I was like, this is going to be the most depressing album I've ever made. This is going to be, nobody's going to want to listen to this record. It's just going to be so dark. And it's beautiful to me that when I listen back to the songs on that record, it sounds like light to me. Like I hear light in this record, and it was the end of the winter. It was the coming of spring. So that's all the context that led me to the swing on this like strangely warm day, where the rain stopped for a few minutes, and I went out to the swing with my guitar to try to work out a song.
When you say these songs represent kind of the end of that winter, but then it sounds like you didn't come into the studio like with this song at all. Was this like a time that you were like writing the songs like then and there versus like coming in with all these ideas?
Yes, I think I had The Dark Before the Dawn was the only song that I had written when I started recording the album. And Gabe would, he would record these little snippets of guitar parts or keyboard parts, and I would then take those guitar parts and drive around Nashville listening to them, trying to find something to hang a song on. And so he and I co-wrote a few of them. And then Ben Shive, like Ben gave me the Sowers song, was a TV track that he'd made. He was kind of writing some songs for like Sync. And I called him one day and I was like, hey, do you have any just random things laying around that you haven't used? And he sent me the piano part for the Sowers song, including the weird ending to that song. And I would just drive around listening to the instrumental track, trying to find a way to write lyrics to it. So yeah, that I was kind of in a panic because I felt like I didn't have enough songs and was just trying to find something. But I tend to work better that way. So
Like under the gun.
yeah, for sure.
Let me reference a couple lines here because I'd love to know, like, I mean, if you're up for it, like what's going on here? What's going on when you say somewhere that, because you're talking about being on a swing near your house, but then there's somewhere the sun is a light in the sky, but I'm dying in North Carolina and I can't believe there's an end to this season of night and the rain keeps falling. What's happening in North Carolina?
Yeah, man. Well, here we go. I was on the Christmas tour and we were playing in Charlotte, and
Behold the Lamb of God.
yes, the Behold the Lamb of God. And the Christmas tour, for some reason, like there have been years where that tour was the hardest thing that I ever did. But it was very confusing to be on a tour bus surrounded by my best friends, people that I'd made music for many years, and to have felt terribly lonely. And so I was out on that tour singing a gospel that I desperately believed, and also would often finish the concert and go into a stairwell and just start crying without knowing why. And so it was just there was a dynamic that was there that now I know was triggering some past trauma, So I was like feeling old pain in this new situation where the new situation really didn't merit it. It was just triggering this old stuff. And so it kind of came to a head in North Carolina. I remember I was walking toward the stage for sound check, and I could hear the whole band on stage goofing around and laughing and waiting for me to show up. I had called Jamie and told her I wasn't doing well, and she prayed for me. And then I was walking down the long kind of corridors of this church in North Carolina, and on the way to the stage, the whole time I was walking, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how to do this. I can't fake it anymore, because I'd just been pretending to be happy and pretending to have a good time when I felt like, the bottom had dropped out on the inside. And so as I was walking toward the stage, there was a janitor's closet, and the door was open and the light was off. And right before I got to the stage, I just ducked behind the door of the janitor's closet and was standing there in the dark praying. And I remember standing there just listening to all of the fun that was being had outside and feeling somehow cut off from it. And without understanding why, I just felt terribly alone, and didn't know how to articulate that to my friends. I think if I had, they would have dropped what they were doing and you know, prayed for me and come, and what this is not on them at all. And so I was standing behind the door and I was praying, Lord, please, I need light right now. I feel this darkness and I just am desperate for some light. And while I was standing there praying, somebody from the church walked by and closed the janitor door.
I mean, that's horrible, but it's also, I mean, it's,
Oh man, it's so tragic comic. And I went from like semi darkness to full darkness. And when that happened, I remember kind of falling to my knees and just sobbing on the floor. And I didn't know why. I was like trying to understand what was going on, and had some inklings of some of the pain. But anyway, it was just a really hard moment that represented a much broader season in my life. And I just laid there on the floor crying and crying for hours, like 2 hours. I remember at some point, Ben and Andy found me and they prayed for me in the room. And by that point, the crowd for the show they had arrived. There was a few thousand people like lined up, and the line was going past the janitor's closet. So I had to walk through the crowd to get to the tour bus to wash my face and change my clothes. And Ben and Andy were like amazing. They kind of like flanked me and they were like, we're going to get you to the bus right now. And they walked me to the bus and I washed my face and I went out and I did the show like nothing was wrong. And that was also one of the most chilling parts of it all, was that I was able to perform, quote unquote. And the thing is, like, in God's great kindness, there was nothing better that I could have been doing in the wake of that pain than to perform the liturgy, so to speak, of standing on stage with my friends, singing these songs that I'd been singing for 15 or 18 years at that point, being reminded of the truth of the gospel. Like, no matter how I feel, these things are still true. And anyway, so when I was sitting on the bench and I thought about the season of life that I was in, that moment was the moment that I started in.
Later on, there's a stanza where you talk about like planting seeds with Sky, your daughter. And in general, there are always these wisps of hope at the end of the songs that you write that tend toward sadness, darkness, depression. Do you feel a sense of like artistic responsibility to provide some of that? Is that like hey, as a Christian making music, I feel like there needs to be some hope within, or I'm not doing my job, or is that not the case? Like that just happens to be, because I just wonder like what it would have been like for you just to leave it here. Because at the end, you're saying the rain just keeps falling and falling, but then here's this like responsive vocal, and she's saying peace be still. So there's this way at the end of like, okay, some respite from all this rain. But did you ever think that maybe I'll just leave it with the rain, that maybe that's honest here too? Like, I guess I just wonder how you deal with that in general and on this song.
I think it comes down to calling. I think that if you are a Christian who's writing songs, it is not necessary for you to resolve everything. And in fact, I don't know that even this song resolves everything, because the rain is still falling at the end of the song. I'm still in the mud season. The turn that happens is that I remember that seeds need rain, and the rain does more than just make us sad. It actually feeds the earth, And so my hobby gardening was the thing that kind of helped me. I've told quite a few friends this, that I think that there are two great lies of depression, and the one is you're alone and no one knows what this is like. You feel like, isolated and alone. And I think that that's a total lie. You're just not. There are a lot of people who resonate with what you're feeling. Christ himself does. The second lie is that this is forever, that this is your life and it's going to go on like this forever. And that's what the rain keeps falling kind of gets at, is that like, man, when is the season going to turn? Because it can feel like spring is never going to come. And the fact is, it just does every year since creation was begun. Spring has come, and so we have evidence. So my personally, my conviction is that I think it is important to be honest about the darkness, but I think it's just as important to be honest about the light. That it's so easy to focus on your doubts that it can feel like, how do I put it? People sometimes equate honesty with only the dark side of things. Does that make sense? And I think there are good reasons for that. But I also want to be like, hey, if you're going to be honest about the fact that your heart is beating right now. Be honest about the fact that a baby was born somewhere in the world right now and its parents are weeping with joy. Be honest about the fact that the world is unreasonably beautiful, even though the world is also unreasonably broken. So I feel a personal conviction to draw attention to both things. I feel like it would be dishonest if I didn't acknowledge the beautiful contradiction of light. And so in the Michael Card talks about the Vav imperative. I don't know if you've heard of this before. I think he coined that phrase. Maybe he got it from some other theologian, but in the Hebrew word Vav means and yet. There's this precedent in the laments in the Psalms. I think there's only one psalm that doesn't have a Vav moment where the psalmist lets loose. I've been reading the Psalms in this season right now, and I'm just astonished by what a gift it is that at the center of the text that my faith hinges on are these poems of depression. It's amazing to me. Like, I just read 38 maybe this morning, and I was just like amazed by the honesty in those Psalms. But there's almost always even though I feel this way, yet I will follow you. Yet you are good. You know what I mean? And so I feel a personal conviction to like make sure that there's, even if it's this tiny, molecule-sized Vav, like in the song, there needs to be an and yet. In the same way that Rembrandt, the darkness in his paintings makes the light more beautiful. So yeah, I think that I had written, I'll just say this, I'd written this whole song without that last verse. I didn't know how to finish it, but it didn't feel finished. And maybe that's kind of what you're getting at. My personal aesthetic, I just had a sense that the song wasn't over. And it wasn't until I found the Lucy Shaw poem called Forecast that I was able to go, oh. And the poem for the listeners just says, planting seeds inevitably changes my feelings about rain.
Love that. So this seems like a great place to have you take us into the song. Andrew, we'd love for you to kind of take us there, if you will. You want to tell us?
Hey, my name is Andrew Peterson, and this is my song, The Rain Keeps Falling. And I hope it's good for your heart.
I tried to be brave, but I hid in the dark. I sat in that cave and I prayed for a spark to light up all the pain that remained in my heart. And the rain kept falling down on the roof of the church where I cried. I could hear all the laughter and love, and I tried to get up and get out, but a part of me died, and the rain kept falling down. Well, I'm scared if I open myself to be known, I'll be seen and despised and be left all alone. So I'm stuck in this tomb and you won't move the stone, and the rain keeps falling. Somewhere the sun is a light in the sky, but I'm dying in North Carolina, and I can't believe there's an end to this season of night, and the rain keeps falling down, falling down, falling down. There's a woman at home and she's praying for a light. My children are there and they love me in spite of the shadow I know that they see in my eyes, and the rain keeps falling tired of this game, of these songs of the road. I'm already ashamed of the line I just wrote. But it's true and it feels like I can't sing a note. And the rain keeps falling down. Falling down. Falling down.
Peace, be still. Peace, be still.
My daughter and I put the seeds in the dirt. And every day now we've been watching the earth for a sign that this death will give way to a birth. And the rain keeps falling down on the soil where the sorrow is laid. And the secret of life is igniting the grave. And I'm dying to live, but I'm learning to wait. And the rain is falling.
Be still. Peace, be still.
I just wanna be new again. Just wanna be closer to you again. Lord, I can't find the song. I'm so tired and I'm always so wrong. Help me be brave tonight. Jesus, please help me out of this cave tonight. I've been calling and calling. This rain just keeps falling. I've been calling and calling. But this rain just keeps falling and falling. Is it you? Is it you? Is it true? Is it you?
You've been listening to The Deepest Cut, part of the Rabbit Room Podcast Network. Audio production and theme music by Isaac Vining. Logo and identity work by Meg Cook. The Deepest Cut was created and hosted by me, Matt Connor. Thank you so much for listening.